A quiet introvert girl named Udan is sitting in the corner of the class wondering if her opper reached his class or not, when a girl suddenly barges in the class, shouting with excitement, saying she just saw a senior transfer student who has in tow taking looks. Dayan started thinking again that she had never expected his opper, who they thought died in a plane crash, would return 10 years later. And then she started daydreaming about the memories of earlier moments when she witnessed her grandfather crying and hugging her opper, mesmerized and happy by the fact that he was still alive. This perfect moment gets disturbed as soon as Dayan gets frightened because she hears Heejin, the bully, yelling her name with frustration in her voice. She couldn't help but wonder if she was in more trouble now. This time, at pay, she had to hand over her gym clothes to Heejin. But what would Dayan wear if Heejin handed over her clothes? When she asks this question, Heejin hits her hard on the head and tells her that she has no right to argue with them. Dayan's heart sank as she realized that defending herself would only cause her more suffering. She accepts her fate in silence, realizing that she can do nothing except submit to Heejin's demands. Uijin, Dayan's opper, was introduced in his class as a recent immigrant who had relocated from abroad. However, as he was making his way back to his seat, a guy pulled out his leg with the intention that Heejin would trip and fall down in front of everyone. Heejin had excellent instincts and stopped just in time. Heejin glared at that man viciously before he realized he had promised the lieutenant not to cause any trouble. He talked to the lieutenant about how he wouldn't cause any trouble because he didn't want to act hastily and end up dead like an amateur. He had 10 years of professional combat experience and knew how to protect himself from trouble. But the lieutenant refused Heejin to fight because he was more worried about his opponent than him. Heejin sat next to his classmate, Park Youngchin, as the teacher instructed him to guide Heejin. He asked Heejin if he was surprised when that guy, Lee Jaehyung, tried to trip him. He warned Heejin to be careful around him and Ju Hyukchin. The math lecture began, and Heejin's batchmate told him to ask if he wanted any help in understanding something. While the lecture was going on, Heejin observed what everyone was doing during the lecture before turning to face the window. He noticed a group of people playing and thought back to his own childhood, where they had to use guns and kill people since they were young. He noticed that this country is way more peaceful than what he had experienced abroad. Heejin waited for Dayan at the school entrance after school was done, so they could work home together. It was a little awkward working together, as they were separated at a young age and didn't know much about each other. On her way back home, she meets the group that bullies her. They misunderstood Heejin as her boyfriend, but Dayan instantly cleared the misunderstanding by telling them that it was her brother. In order to prevent Heejin from finding out that they were bullying her, Dayan agreed when Heejin asked if that girl was her friend. However, that girl took this as an insult and pressed the matter further while wearing a threatening expression. Are they really friends? Terrifying Dayan. The topic shifted when one of the boys started shouting when he noticed that Heejin was glaring at him. They thought Heejin was someone who was just trying to act cool and didn't actually know how to fight. That guy was working further defenseless, exposing his every weak point to Heejin. He suddenly remembered that he was living a new life here and wasn't supposed to fight. That person grabbed Heejin by the collar as Dayan suddenly apologized, bowed, and explained that he had lived abroad for a long time and hadn't adapted to the local culture out of fear of getting Heejin in trouble. The man ignored the explanation and began shouting, which startled Dayan and made Heejin more enraged when he saw the terrified expression on her face. He tossed that boy's hand from his collar, which did hurt the boy. Heejin worked towards Dayan while throwing his bag. He took off his blazer to cover her eyes and told her to stand still for a bit. The boy came enraged towards Heejin for fighting, but it backfired on him when Heejin threw him to the ground with just a single punch. Everyone looked horrified to witness what just happened. There, the lieutenant was taking practice while thinking that everything was fine on Heejin's end. But it was quite the opposite. Heejin also knocked out the other guy when he came up to fight Heejin. Dayan was confused when she took off the blazer. Heejin worked towards Dayan, asking her if she was surprised. He then changed the topic by asking her if she wanted to eat something because of her shocked reaction to the first question. Dayan refused to eat out. On their way back to their house, Dayan questioned Heejin about whether he was the one who had knocked out the two sunbees. Dayan was surprised by his agreement, because it didn't seem like something he would do. She warned him against glaring at people because they might misunderstand it. But it turns out that even where he used to live, making eye contact could be dangerous. She questioned why he would do that even though he was aware of it, and he simply responded that he did it because it appeared that they were bothering her. They reached home, and Heejin then began doing the dishes after dinner. Although his grandfather urged him not to, he persisted. When his grandfather asked him about the dinner, He was delighted to hear compliments because he had specifically attended cooking class when he learned that Udan would be returning. They talked about their first day of school, and to Dayan's delight, Udan didn't tell his grandfather about the drama that occurred. They wished each other good night and settled into their respective rooms. Udan found himself dreaming about the day's events as he lay in bed. He remembered how his grandfather cried upon seeing him and how he had prepared dinner for him. He was grateful to know the feeling of having a family as he was separated from his sister and grandfather in the same bus crash that killed his parents. He woke up gasping, realizing that it was just a dream. Udan worked out of his room, seeing Dayan in an apron. He asked where Grandpa was and found out that he had already left for work, realizing that he had only taken some days off since he was coming, and now he's back to work. Realizing early for school and told Udan to eat last night's leftovers that were kept on the table. Udan came to know about the incident that happened yesterday. The girl who witnessed it yesterday was terrified but calmed herself, thinking that there was nothing to worry about since Udan's brother was in the Alpha group among the third years. As soon as Dayan reached school, Udan started picking on her. She told Dayan to follow her, and when she asked where to go, Udan started shouting at her, saying that she was now acting tough because she had a brother. They took her out, and Udan kicked her in the stomach. She asked her about yesterday and warned her not to oppose them just because her brother had some fighting experience. She told Dayan that because he had messed with her brother's friends, her brother's life would now be difficult at school. Dayan yelled on a whim, knowing that it would make her brother the target of bullying. Udan slapped her for yelling at them, but she didn't care because her brother was more important to her. The two bullies in Udan's class were hitting people with paper balls and erasers, and when they aimed at Udan, Udan blocked it unintentionally with his bag. The two boys thought of fighting Udan after school. Udan asked Udan if he was free after school, but he politely refused, saying that he had to work home together with his little sister, Udan. Udan told Udan that Dayan didn't live an easy life at school, as she had been popular since middle school because she was cute and did well in school, which attracted male students. Udan had a crush on one of the boys and started bullying Dayan for it, but no one dared say anything because Udan's older brother is Kim Kiso, the top dog among third-year class 3. Udan remembered that Dayan had told her grandfather that she had been doing well in school and he didn't have to worry about her. Kim Kiso and his group entered Udan's class. They were just about to hit Udan when Dayan barged in. She hurried to his class when she heard that Udan's opper and his friends were coming to fight Udan. Udan became enraged when he noticed the bruises on Dayan's face and the shoe mud on her clothing. Udan punched one of the group members, reassuring Dayan that it wasn't her fault and that these guys were to blame instead. They broke into an intensive fight in class, where Udan knocked out every member of the gang while being unharmed. Everyone's jaw dropped. Udan worked towards Kim and his sister, asking them with a lethal look if they were the ones who gave Dayan a hard time. Udan fought Kim Kiso and dodged his first hit, but when he was about to hit again, Udan grabbed his leg and threw him to the floor. Udan kicked him in the face while he was shredded with blood. Udan was going towards Udan with such a look that it looked like he was going to hit her, but Dayan stopped him midway. She smiled and assured him that she was fine. Udan walked her to class, and Dayan apologized on the way because Udan was forced into fights yesterday and even today because of her. He told her that it was obvious that he'd fight for her, as where he used to live, people only fought about themselves, but they acted differently when their families were involved. Even though he doesn't remember Grandpa and her, he was sure that they were his family. He dropped her off at her class, and when he came back, everyone was staring at him, thinking that he was amazing when he beat those guys up. There was a tensed-up aura in the room where Udan's group and Kim Ki-soo's group met. Udan thought that they were just caught off guard, and they couldn't just back off because one guy beat them up. But Kim Ki-soo shouted back at Udan, saying that if you just want to flap your mouth, go fight him yourself. Udan returns to class enraged and obviously envious of Dayan because she would now enjoy a wonderful school experience. Dayan worked towards the school gate, dazed in her thoughts, thinking about what Udan said to her today, that they're a family, and wondering if she'd be able to go to school without being bullied, without bringing Udan and her group food as a servant, or without getting hit just to survive in school. Dayan snapped out of her thoughts when Udan asked her what was keeping her so deep in thought that she couldn't even hear him. He explained to her that he waited for her because he was barred with directions. They walked together and thought of stopping at a store to pick up some groceries so that they could make lunch before Grandpa got back from work. Udan and her friends saw how Dayan was enjoying herself. Udan smirked, saying that this happiness won't last long. Dayan and Udan reached the store and started picking up groceries. Udan caught the girl's attention. Seeing this, Daeun noticed that Ijin was popular both inside and outside of school. When Daeun asked him if he had girlfriends where he used to live, he declined, saying he didn't have any because he was too busy. When he repeated the question to her, she stuttered but refused, saying that she was also busy. When they got back home, they ate dinner, and after that, Grandpa gave Ijin the most recent model phone, on which he had already set up their contact in Grand Peon. Despite having no idea how to do it, his grandfather asked the clerk for help because he wanted to do it himself. Ijin lay on the bed with the phone and texted the lieutenant to save this number. The lieutenant did snap out because he got Ijin the most expensive phone, but he still changed his phone. Daeun left early for school, but she met a group of masked girls who suddenly kicked her. When she apologized, they slapped her even harder. They took her to the karaoke. Until then, Daeun had recognized the voice and knew that the girl behind the mask was Heejin. They came out after having fun, but when the staff opened the room for cleaning, he saw Daeun lying on the floor, beaten up. He offered to call the police, but Daeun refused, stood up, and walked home. She didn't come to school. Heejin waited for her at the school entrance, but she was not picking up her phone either. When Heejin reached home, he found out that Daeun was already there. He talked to her from outside the room as it was locked. Her voice was trembling while staring. She told him she only had a slight fever and would be fine if she slept by it. He was just going out to buy some medicine when he saw blood stains on Daeun's school shoes. Heejin put bandages on Daeun's wounds, and Daeun lied to him that she fell down some stairs trying to dodge a bike. She refused to go to the hospital, as then they would find that she lied. She thought of telling the cops that Heejin was the one who beat her up, but she knew if she did that, Heejin's mother would back Heejin, and no one would believe her. She would be forced to call her parents, and she didn't want her grandpa to be worried about her. She snapped back to reality and told Heejin that she was worried that grandpa wouldn't take this well as he had a heart problem. Heejin told Daeun to rest and worked out of the room. Sitting in a night clue had Kisu and his group were discussing how even Kisu was destroyed by one person, and how the entire school was aware of what had happened yesterday. They decided to gang up against him. Heejin called Kisu and told him how she handled the situation with Daeun and refused to remain silent because of what happened yesterday. With a menacing look, Heejin entered the nightclub. He started fighting and punching people right away, taking them all out one by one. He made a serious threat to Kim Kisu to not mess with his sister. His eyes and tone showed that he was not joking. Kim was thinking that Heejin knocked down the guy near the hallway to make their escape harder and attacked them in such a way that forced them to go over the tables. He takes advantage of his surroundings so quickly that it's difficult to take him down. Heejin started throwing bottles at him and he kept dodging, but after Kim got too close, Heejin punched him so hard in the face that his nose started bleeding. When Kim tried to hit Heejin with a bottle, Heejin grabbed Kim by the throat, punched him, and knocked him down. Heejin gave Kim his final warning to not mistreat his sister anymore and told Heejin to be careful too, because if she bothers Daeun, Heejin would still come after Kim. Heejin worked out of the nightclub and saw Heejin. She tripped off her shoes seeing him. Heejin got a call from his grandfather to come home. He saw Heejin and worked off. When Heejin got inside the club, she saw everyone on the ground and her brother sitting, covered in blood. He told Heejin not to mess with Daeun. He repeated it in an orderly way. When she asked him if he was afraid of Heejin now, he started yelling at her and told her that if she messed with Daeun, he was going to beat her instead. Heejin and his grandfather had a conversation outside the house. They discussed Daeun's injuries while sitting on a bench. He wasn't certain that her bruises were caused by falling down the stairs, and she even refused to visit the hospital. His grandfather told him that he was thankful that Daeun grew up the way she did. She helped him get over the bus accident. It hurts his grandfather to see her hurt, and moreover, she won't tell him how she got hurt. His grandfather knows that the more kids grow, the less they talk to their parents. Heejin comforted Grandpa by saying that he hasn't been there for long, but he can see the fact that Daeun loves Grandpa very much, and he does too. Heejin and her parents were at the hospital while Kim was hospitalized. Their father, Congressman Kim, was shouting at them for getting into trouble, while their mother was defending them. Their father's anger stemmed from his concern for their safety, but their mother understood that accidents happen and wanted to support her children. Despite the tension, Heejin and her parents were united in their love for Kim and their desire to see him recover quickly. Her mother had already contacted the chief, as she couldn't wait until Monday for this matter to be solved. She told the chief to handle the guy who beat up her kids so brutally, One was hospitalized and the other had their wrists broken. The followers of the chief knocked at Daeyu hospitalized looking for Ijin. Ijin told Daeun and Grandpa that they were his acquaintances and he would come back after taking a work with them. He followed them quietly without making a fuss. When they grabbed his arm to beat him up with the bat, he stopped the god's hand from grabbing him and punched his face. He dodged the swinging bat and punched the other guard too. The chief was noticing his every move. The chief thought that he looked like someone who was properly trained and someone who had a lot of real combat experience. The chief and Ijin fought, and Ijin dodged many of his hits. But after an intensive fight, the chief, who's even respected in the underworld, lost. The chief called Ijin's father to tell him about his defeat and to remind him that Ijin is not a normal high schooler. Ijin had already reached Congressman Kim's office while the chief was still talking to him. The congressman was shocked at how Ijin took down the guards and the chief, and, moreover, how he knew that they were at the office. Ijin's mom got agitated and threatened to report him to Prosecutor Choi for assault against her kids, assault against the guards, and unlawful entry into the office. Ijin told her that he knows that he is a congressman who's been elected twice, and he's going to run for the next election too. As soon as she called the prosecutor, Ijin played a video of Ijin beating Daeun at the karaoke. Ijin's mother disconnected the call. Ijin told them that he also had footage of Kisu beating people in the school alleyways, and even footage of them stealing money. She yelled at Ijin, telling him that his threats would not work on them. He told her that the threat was from the person who hired someone to assault him, and he filmed it too. Ijin's father asked him if he only did that to Kisu and Ijin because they ganged up on his sister, and it's obvious that it's his duty to protect his sister just like they protected their kids. The congressman promised to provide his sister's medical bills and extra money, and for Kisu and Ijin to apologize to her. But he refused, as an apology doesn't undo the harm they've already caused to Daeun. Ijin only asked for Kisu to permanently stay out of his sight. The congressman decided to send them overseas, and Ijin added that he wanted them gone by tomorrow. The congressman just asked for all the footage in return, but Ijin's glare made him tremble. He asked him if he assumed that he was an idiot with such a look that made the congressman say that he misspoke. Ijin reached back home, seeing Grandpa and Daeun worried about him. They thought that they were dangerous people, but Ijin reassured them that he was just going to have a stroll with them. Daeun told him that they were just worried because those guys gave off a bad vibe. But in return, Ijin replied that she should worry about herself first and asked her how her health was. She said she was doing much better. She was confused when Ijin assured her that she wouldn't be falling down the stairs anymore as he cleared all the things for her. In the morning, Daeun told Ijin that she had almost fully recovered, so he wouldn't have to take her to classes anymore. Daeun reached her class, where she heard that Ijin and Kisu had been transferred overseas. Daeun instantly knew that Ijin was behind this, and she rushed back to him, crying. He saw her and calmly said, "See you later." And Ijin's group was talking about why Ijin and Kisu were leaving so suddenly. They asked this to Young, who was there with Ijin when they beat Daeun. She was startled and replied that she thought Ijin was leaving because the teachers said it too. She tried contacting her, but she wasn't picking up her phone. Young knew their last texts were that Ijin's screwed now because her mom is getting involved. Ijin suddenly comes in and sits. She told them she was just going for a semester, and it could be counted as a vacation for her. She told them that it was a family matter because she was too embarrassed to accept that it was because of Ijin. The topic escalated to what happened to Ijin. They asked Ijin if Kisu's gang took care of him. She replied that she didn't know about it. Ijin told them that she was going to tell her mom to give his grandpa a hard time, as he was just a patrolman. Suddenly, Ijin walked in, wearing a mask and hiding his face. He refused to accept that he was Ijin, and noticed that everyone from the video was there. He asked them why they were not playing any songs, as they love being noisy. Ijin closed the door of the room. The congressman asked Kisu about Ijin's whereabouts, and he said that she had just gone to see her friends goodbye. Suddenly, someone came in to tell them to watch the news. There was leaked footage of the ill-doings of Kisu and Ijin, the congressman's children. The chief met Ijin and asked why he did that. He thought that Ijin was just going to make a deal with the congressman. He heard the footage and had to take care of it quietly if he wanted to protect his identity. Their parents were politicians, so he thought the best course of action was to resolve this quietly. He said that it was because he had a twisted personality. The congressman wouldn't stand by and let this happen. But he didn't have time to worry about this, because there was even leaked evidence of the congressman's voting fraud, money laundering, and solicitation. The information was so valid that even the members of his party were asking for a thorough investigation. The chief asked him if he had also stolen his personal files too, as he was able to find the dirt of Congressman Kim, which he hid for several years. He asked Ijin who he really was, and Ijin replied with the same answer that he was just a normal high schooler again.